Okay.
Welcome, everybody, to the second session here of our Preventing War, our inquiry into preventing war. And we're a small group, but we'll hopefully expand. What I thought we might do to start off is just reflect a little bit on our first session, which was when I went back and re-saw the video. It was quite an interesting set of discussions, and I wondered if people had any real takeaways from last week's session that you want to share before I tell you what I took away. Meta, can you get a gallery view because I can hardly see with the.
I'm on gallery view.
Oh,
I don't.
no. Okay, I just removed the recording bar. Great, thanks. Any thoughts on last week? As I know so many things happened between last Wednesday and this Wednesday. I don't blame you if you don't immediately come up with something. Um, One of the things that very interesting in our discussion last week is we sort of moved from abolish to eliminate to reduce. So I found, we got more and more timid with this prevention idea. And we began to see that, we have to prevent with some groups differently than we have to prevent with other groups. So I found that a lot of the base of our discussion last week was trying to figure out this relationship between the nation states and their governance collectively with a super annual body like the UN and what the relationship should be and where the power should be. And I found particularly elucidating that the UN um, uh, laws can't really prevent war as it stands today unless it's respected, unless it's a state respects its authority or respects international laws, and that's really what gives it normative strength is that respect. And clearly, the P5, a number of them, don't respect the UN to keep peace, and they feel that they should be the preeminent authority. So it got us talking about how to strengthen the UN, how to reform it in terms of enforcement mechanisms with multilateral forces. And I think that was very, very interesting, which we'll carry on with today. I just like to also say I was interested by this notion that we also have to change behavior and attitudes of people and citizens, and of course, their pressure on politicians in order to be able to take those good decisions that would lead to respecting international laws and following those guidelines. Um, and we one of the things that occurred to me when some people were talking about the predatory powers and as opposed to the middle powers, and how the middle powers have to sort of not cooperate. It brought me back to this idea in Gandhi of non-cooperation. And I think that's probably something that will bring, I'll just keep as a note when we start talking about the case study of Sudan, uh, not next session, but the following session. How you work on non-cooperation, like we did with South Africa during the apartheid, anti-apartheid struggle. the non-cooperation of trade with South Africa. And I guess the only other point that I picked up on was this idea of parallel meetings to give the political will, like the Santa Marta meeting or the TPNW, the landmines, that builds pressure or a greater political will within the UN. Finally, the press for parliamentary assembly. I think we're going to deal with that a little bit today. So, and the importance of NGO as a key reform actor. So these are some of the things that I brought out. If you're interested, I'm happy to put this in a note and send it to you, but I'm sure you have your own takeaways.
Jill, Richard has his hand up.
Oh,
Sometimes you can't see the
with
hand, so it might make good for you to open the participants windows because that shows the hands so you
Okay.
can touch them quicker.
Thank you very much. Richard, sorry, I don't know how long you had your hand up. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much, Jill. Again, I'm a little bit optimistic. One is I think people do respect international law to some extent, and as a result, when they disagree with the law, they get out of it. And so we've seen both the US and Russia, North Korea cancel many of the treaties, and so now there's no treaties uh, hinder them. But uh, they did respect treaties while that they were in existence, but then they backed out of them, and so that they don't have to be hindered by them. The same with joining the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. They just don't join, and therefore they're not hindered. But I mean, I think the basic thing is that yes, they do respect laws and treaties, and when they aren't in agreement, then they cancel them and back out. The second thing is you talked about human behavior, and I think I mentioned it last time, is that during the Second World War, Germany, Italy, and Japan were our enemies, and now they're our bosom friends. Russia, our Soviet Union in those days, and China were our allies, and now they're our enemies. And now, of course, this past week, China is now a friend again, in quotes.
Right. Very interesting. Any other comments? For such a talkative group, I can't believe you're silent. But anyway.
Well, if you read the topics aloud, you'll sort of take one after another.
Sure. We'll move on to session 2 now. So
Yeah.
I hope all of you saw the film Abolishing War with Winston Langley and Lawrence Whitner. And out of that came 3 or 4 very interesting suggestions. Does anyone want to say anything about the film before we sort of do a review of some of the points they made?
Well, again, I think uh, the rules are there, but people aren't using them, and certainly are not enforcing them. So, in terms of the Security Council, you are to abstain if you have a conflict of interest, and everybody has a conflict of interest, but they still veto, even though they have a conflict of interest. The second thing is, as Winston pointed out, Article 109, Section 3, is that you can, it should be up for review, and after 10 years, you only need a simple majority of the General Assembly to enforce it or to make the changes at the UN to reform. But nobody is doing it. They keep coming up with excuses. And, the same on the NPT. They keep saying that, not now's not the right time, even after 50 odd years. So, when is that right time going to be? And for a lot of us, the right time is definitely now. It was long ago.
Did everybody see that? The UN Charter 109, Section 3 issue that 10 years after the ICJ was set up, the
David has his hand up and then Rose. I'm
okay.
gonna. You want me to call on people because I think you don't see the hands.
It's because of the bright light here, but yes, please
Okay.
go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this meeting. It was of very particular interest to me because I, of course, was a lawyer for many years and also was in the legislature and in the executive branch of the Manitoba government. So I approach solutions that are based on structural change, like rules of law, very seriously. And when I see them absent or not functioning justly or at all effectively and enforceably, I have grave concern, especially when human-caused threats and risks to human existence and flourishing are patent and not being addressed. So I feel a great sense of urgency and devote, as Richard Denton knows, every day and many hours every day to the cause of addressing this. So what was coincidental but inspired by your topic caused me to dig deeper into what I was well aware of, and that was Article 109. But when I heard that mentioned in your wonderful dialogue, Meta, with two distinguished, knowledgeable people on the subject of international law, I felt maybe there's a chance that this group can contribute to the necessary collective action to motivate the political will from Canada and beyond that, by example, to cause the intent of Article 109 to be advanced and realized. So today, I explored the 109 Coalition's latest materials and took the time to watch a panel discussion led by Jeffrey Sachs with some of the leading voices for UN, not just reform, but redrafting, a totally new version based still on the model of sovereign states being the members, but an attempt to avoid the failure of the review processes, which we are all aware of, anyone that's followed the attempts to deal with these existential threats and risks and the failure of the United Nations and make it better. And even in the 80th year of its existence, of course, not much progress has been made, but Pact for the Future and other documents came out of it. But there was a gathering of parliamentarians in Turkey, April 15th to 19th of this year, where Article 9 Coalition really met with the parliamentarians from around the world. They had 1,500 delegates, 720 parliamentarians, and 126 countries represented. And the panel discussion, which is available online, led by Jeffrey, is very, very instructive. And it had the Prime Minister of Barbados being one of the panelists, the President of Ghana, and then they had four of the leading voices for constitutional reform, who are foreign minister kind of levels or ambassadors from different countries. And I came away from hearing that this 109 approach, which really means bringing in civil society to be the agents in pressure for change, given that the bureaucrats and the people just speaking for governments aren't voicing with imagination, courage, and independence needed to bring about significant change. So I came away believing that this has traction, and I thanks to your inspiration and motivation caused by your inspiration, will now be very much involved in the 109 Coalition initiative.
Wow.
and doing everything I can within my spheres of influence, which are through Rotary, through the Masters in Human Rights program at the University of Manitoba Law School, and through the Morrow Institute, which is a graduate and both master's and PhD program in peace and conflict studies at the University of Manitoba as well. So through those spheres of influence, we have platforms, and every year we have for example, even for youth, we have the Youth Nuclear Peace Summit from October 28th to 30th this year. It'll be the sixth one of those. And we have a symposium, which I've just agreed to support again, which will be in February at the Master in Human Rights at the law school. And the Morrow Institute is planning an international summit to deal with big international issues and re-advance the idea of Arthur V. Morrow of Winnipeg becoming the new Geneva. So in August of 2027, there will be an international summit that they're putting on. So those are the kinds of opportunities where you can expand the reach and build the awareness, create the motivation to do something. And this is a vehicle where civil society is invited to be involved. You don't have to be a PhD, a lawyer, or a bureaucrat, or a diplomat. This is now a task for global humanity to take on, because the United Nations is presently constituted through its country representatives, including ours, have not done enough to bring about a solution for change. That solution is now there. Section 109 is the chosen means. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you very
let
much.
me interrupt Jill, because I want to pursue in hot pursuit of David's idea. Listen, I'm just so glad you're in that 109 coalition or whatever it's called. Can you and I talk separately? I'll call you about setting up an episode specifically with the 109 coalition to talk about that issue, just that alone. Okay, would you work with me on developing one?
No, absolutely. I think that you. Actually, I was I'm in a book club with World Beyond War about the book One Earth, One Humanity, One Future by Winslow Myers and Libby Traubman. And it is, again, very supportive of all of this. And this recently published books is the kind of thing that is easily readable and can inspire people. So I definitely would be willing to advance this through you in whatever way you consider best after discussion.
And also, David, to get the dates of some of the symposium that we could put into the magazine under sections so people could become aware of it. That would be wonderful. Thank you for that. Can we move on to Rose? Rose has had her hand up.
Well, that's quite an impressive dissertation we just had from David. I would watch the video on abolishing war and or about the book on abolishing war, and something that came out that sounded interesting, because there's always so much concern about the stalemate in the Security Council if there's a rogue participant, and how that nations should be excluded. But something came up, and correct me if I'm wrong or didn't get it right. That vote to exclude that individual, if that a majority vote would get around that hurdle. Is that what you heard, Meta, or anyone else who was on that um, uh, video or watching it?
Yeah.
You're asking me a question? What?
Well, I guess you sounded. I think you said that it was a fairly new thing that you were hearing for the first time as well.
Oh, it's because I don't I don't remember what I know. Sometimes I learn things and forget them. So it's just
Yes. Okay. Well, then that's
No,
fine.
no, but
I think
that's
it was to do with 109. Mhm.
yeah, it's the 109 Section 3, which provides a veto, which says that when it came up, the ICJ was empowered within 10 years to raise the issue of the Security Council veto, and it would move to the General Assembly for a simple vote of a majority. And that would have been in 1955. But because the Security Council wanted to hold on to the power, that never happened. And so now what David is talking about is the reinvigoration of the 109, UN Charter 109, Section 3, in order to see how to do that. In fact, there's other parts as well, which we'll talk about. And I think, that's what we were saying. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Robin, you had your hand up.
he's muted.
Muted. Yeah.
So, just to clarify, Article 109 of the UN Charter it provides the opportunity by which members of the UN can amend the charter. That's the purpose of
I
it.
see it's the amended charter.
So it's built into the charter.
Right.
The members of the General Assembly could call a meeting of this conference of the UN under Article 109, and they could vote on it. And they could vote by a two-thirds majority within the General Assembly to put forward a proposal for a vote to the UN. That vote would have to be passed if it's in the category of peace and security by a two-thirds majority of the UN plus all 5 members of the Security Council. So Article 9 does not allow the General Assembly to override a veto of the Security Council. That should be very clear. Its strength is it provides a mechanism never used, as has been pointed out, never used by the UN to bring forward proposals to amend the UN Charter. For instance, to eliminate vetoes for P5 members that are conflict participants. So right now, which was agreed by the UN, if there is a veto by a Security Council member that was basically to protect themselves, that goes to the General Assembly for a discussion. So that's a recent advance. It was agreed to by, I believe, unanimously, if I'm not mistaken. Others might, I believe it was unanimous. It certainly was not blocked. And it took place, I believe, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I believe that was the case where it was brought forward. So I just want to make a couple of points on this. The first thing is that 109 was part of the UN Charter from the very beginning. Like it's nothing new. It's just it was never used. And why was it never used? Possibly because those states who wanted to make reforms didn't believe it would get anywhere, as long as the Security Council members had a veto over whatever the reform was. And so they therefore will have the discussions offline and see if there's any, motion in that direction, and then we can proceed at that point to 109 as required. So I'm just adding a little bit of, I don't want to undermine the idea of using 109 because it is a good idea to go that way, but not to have any illusions that all of a sudden the General Assembly can override the Security Council. It's not the case. Absolutely not the case. So why is it written this way is the question I would raise. When the UN Charter was written and accepted, there were many states that said that it was unfair for the P5 to have veto power. That it was undemocratic, and there's a famous. It's actually I think you can see it on video, or at least there's photographs of it. It was the U.S. ambassador, I believe it was, or a U.S. official anyway. He basically said, if you are going to take away the veto away from the members of the P5, you might as well do this. And he holds up I believe it's a UN Charter draft, and he rips it in two. Basically to say, you will not have United Nations if we don't have a veto for the P5. And why was it written that way? Let's go a little deeper into that question. Let's take the Russian invasion of Ukraine. If it was possible for members of the UN and 4 out of 5 members of the Security Council to decide to intervene, to block, or whatever, to use some certain capabilities of the UN against Russia's aggression against Ukraine, then it is likely there could be war between major powers. So the UN Charter was written to defend sovereignty of small states, but also to prevent war between major states. And this compromise, that is the veto, was one mechanism seen at that time in order to maintain that balance.
Thank you, Robin. David, I think you were next, and then James.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree with anything that Robin said, but what I offer is optimism, because the approach that would be taken would be not to go directly to UN reform within the UN. It would be a citizen, and ideally through parliamentarians, through democratic elected people, to co-create really a redesigned architecture for the United Nations. And the Charter was created, what were there, Robin? Less than 60 countries at the time when the Charter was, that supported the Charter, that were part of the initial United Nations. And now, of course, we have multiples of that, 193 countries that are member states of the United Nations. So there's been a huge transformation in terms of the illegitimacy of the United Nations architecture, because it excludes. I mean, this is why the continent of Africa is outraged, because given their percentage of the world population, if you add the populations, it is like 1/4 of the world, absent China, is population represented by the United Nations. We also didn't have an understanding in 1945. We saw what happened with nuclear weapons, but we did not have an appreciation until after the United Nations was formed, that there was not a way to control and prevent their use again in any effective, enforceable way. We also didn't understand climate change and certainly appreciate it. And it wasn't a subject matter that caused us to appreciate that we are one Earth and one global human family and so forth. So the only way to wake up and make develop the collective will around the world is to express it, and through one's own country, advocate, of course, for change within. My friend who wrote Building a Just World Order, Alfred de Zayas, really actually had a plan for such a conference to be assembled. And he argued, as a leading scholar, lawyer, and active representative of the Human Rights Commission, suggested that the General Assembly could be set up by a vote of the General Assembly under Article 22 of the Charter, or it could be created on the basis of a new international treaty between governments. So he's even given a source within the UN Charter to potentially set it up. But whether it's done that way or the ways that the 109 Coalition suggests is still a matter under discussion. But certainly they're proposing that such an initiative actually be set up and develop a means to have a forum, a General Assembly of the willing people who are prepared to put together and approve what is then a draft replacement for the current structure of the United Nations. And that would be done, ideally, between 2030, earliest at 2030, they predict, or 2032. So that's my contribution. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. James.
I have a point of information or a point of clarification, or at least a question that hopefully you can answer collectively. So the Charter of the United Nations, if you look at Chapter 18, which is amendments, it has Article 108 and 109. And I'll just read Article 108. Amendments to the present charter shall come into force for all members of the United Nations when they have adopted by a vote of 2/3 of the members of the General Assembly and ratified in accordance with respective constitutional processes by 2/3 of the members of the United Nations, including all of the permanent members of the Security Council. So I'm wondering whether or not 108 takes any precedence over 109.
Jill?
Does anybody have an opinion on that? I'm wondering if, David, you have an opinion, or Robin.
On that.
I just think that one of the impediments to progress being made has been focusing on the limitations of a grossly out-of-date, illegitimate document that is not equitably representative of the current world and all its now existential threats and risks that are human caused that aren't being addressed effectively and are getting worse. And also a world where the powers, and I would have disagreed with Robin on the initial intent, The initial intent, I would argue, of the five veto power countries, I think it was four at the time to begin with, was they were simply ensuring themselves control of the world. But the intent of the angelical part of those folks, as I understood it, and I've interpreted it, was that they would work together. They would work together to prevent the kinds of disaster that was readily apparent to everybody of the Second World War and
Jill,
of nuclear weapons.
Yes, Meta.
No, it's Robin. I think you should open the.
Yeah, no, but he hadn't finished.
Please.
Just for David to finish. David, have you finished there? Yeah. Robin.
So a couple of points. On the question about 108, 108 is very clearly requires the P5 members to endorse as well, just as 109 does. It's almost the same language. So there's no free ride. One doesn't override the other. They're consistent with one another. To David's point about the UN, the UN was at its formation, there were 51 member states, and then there were another, I don't know, 20 or so by 1955. And then the post-colonial period in the 60s and 70s, there were a whole bunch joined, and then the post-Cold War, Yugoslavia broke down and a number of states joined. So it's been a process of enlargement beginning in 1945, but I guess the obvious point I would make would be they applied to join the UN as according to the UN Charter as it was written at the time. So I don't disagree, David, with your point that there are four times as many states almost now than there were. But states aren't saying we'll only join if you reform the charter or if you take out the veto. There's none of that. There's only one game in town. So this is my concern about creating parallel structures, not because the UN Charter is perfect, because it's imperfect, and I continue to argue that it was written the way it was written precisely for the reasons that it allowed certain privileges to the powerful states, the victors of the Second World War in particular. So therefore, I mean, I do believe reform is necessary, but it's going to be incremental. It's not going to be whole hog, simply because the process is cumbersome. It requires political will by a majority of states, including the P5, and therefore the P5 are going to be looking after their own interests and evaluate whether the veto violates or loss of the veto violates their national interests, right? So we're stuck. So you can argue it different ways. You can say the UN Charter is bad because it's got these flaws, or the UN Charter is all we have, and it has retained for 80 years a semblance of less war, and lots of other things, human rights defense. It is the forum in the world to raise all these issues, and we're frustrated because, over different decades, it's not living up to what we perceive as its primary purposes, because of the way that the structure was built. But so I mean, I'm not trying to be negative about the idea of reform. I'm trying to be as realistic as possible, and therefore we need to look at the mechanisms that will allow for reform. I mean, you can sanction P5 states within the General Assembly and condemn them, vociferously condemn them, and add all the adjectives you want in those resolutions. but they will not change the order until there is some consensus on that.
So what do you mean by consensus, Robin?
Well, I mean a majority, two-thirds majority plus the P5. That's the requirement for that's sufficient consensus to move certain structural changes and peace and security to implement peace and security efforts,
So
missions.
the order would be two-thirds majority General Assembly first, then it gets sent to the Security Council.
No, it would be two-thirds General Assembly, but has to include the 5 members of the Security Council within that two-thirds.
So,
At least two-thirds. At least two-thirds, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, you wouldn't vote it then secondarily. I mean, you could vote it secondarily, but if you, I mean, you can pass it from this General Assembly to the Security Council to act,
Mhm.
and because that is the method for if it's peace and security, right? If it's I forget the word now. Somebody else might have it. It's not a bureaucratic change, instrumental, not instrumental, but if it's a change that isn't a peace and security related, you can do it with two-thirds of the General Assembly because it's not it's not a threat to the P5, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah. So maybe the 109 campaign and David's point of getting NGOs activated is to push on their politicians to get two-thirds. I mean, I think that's that would
Yeah,
be
assuming that your goal is a goal that is going to achieve something. Like um, my grievance with certain activism that has energized youth in particular towards a noble objective outcome is not being honest with them and not telling them that here are the obstacles you will face. Like take the TPNW, you know, there were thousands and thousands of youth that were energized by the effort to develop a treaty for the non-proliferation for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. A great. It came out of, I mean, it came out of organizations that were involved in the landmines campaign and cluster munitions. I mean, in many cases, the same people, not exactly the same people, but in many cases. And the idea was, well, we did it with landmines. Let's do it with nuclear weapons. All you need to do is you get the like-minded states or the middle powers or whatever to create this treaty, and the pressure of that treaty will somehow, as it did with landmines, have some impact on even those states that refused to join the treaty, like the U.S. The U.S. was the largest contributor to landmine removal, even though they never signed the treaty, right? So the idea was there was a normative strengthening of non-use of landmines. Forget what happened in the last couple of years, where there was backpedaling on that. But we did it. We did it with landmines, nuclear. Well, there's a difference. There's a difference between a landmine and a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon is a power mechanism that the P5 in particular own. All of them have them, and they are not going to give them up because two-thirds of the member states of the UN, or even more, say you should eliminate your nuclear weapons. They're not going to do it for that reason, right? So when you generate enthusiasm, especially amongst youth, and this is what we do in the peace movement, you have to be honest with them. You have to say, here is what's going to stop us. Don't even think that by getting everybody but the P5 on board that you're going to eliminate nuclear weapons, because it's not true.
Mhm. Got you. Thank you very much. Any response to, or should we really focus on the other one that Robin, you mentioned, this UN Charter 41, which talks about the use of sanctions against an aggressor state. This is another provision that seems to be underused. Yeah.
Yeah, I was using
David?
I was using sanctions in the generic term, not in the UN Charter, because sanctions is a part of the UN Charter as well. But I meant criticizing was what I meant when I said sanctions. But you could do more than criticize. But yeah, to your point, uh, I'd have to look at it precise. Somebody else might know. David might know precisely whether you need a Security Council support for a sanction.
David, do you want to come in on that? I understand that the Uniting for Peace option can be used in that case.
Yeah, I think you need a Security Council support to do it officially correctly. I just wanted to read into the record the idea which I extracted when I first read Building a Just World Order by Alfred Dodds. And he had created a set of 25 recommendations for a reformed UN. But what really attracted me, because I was always thinking of what Rotary International could do. Sorry, my video went off. What Rotary International can do, and he proposed a World Parliamentary Assembly, which is really the approach being taken by the Section 109, the Article 109 coalition. And here's what he said. Among other civil society initiatives, the launching of a World Parliamentary Assembly or United Nations Parliamentary Assembly is worth exploring. As former Secretary General Boutros Ghali stated, a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, a global body of elected representatives, could
Go ahead.
Could invigorate our institutions of global governance with unprecedented democratic legitimacy, transparency, and accountability. The idea is to remedy democracy deficits by giving voice to global public opinion, including citizens in global decision-making through elected officials. Such an assembly could be set up by a vote of the General Assembly under Article 22 of the Charter, or it could be created on the basis of a new international treaty between governments, followed by an agreement linking it to the United Nations. Neither mechanism requires charter amendment or reform. Global decisions would gain greater legitimacy through citizen input and involvement in an independent World Assembly with consultative functions, or in a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly representing people as well as states. So it appears to me that that is why the coalition in Turkey, in Istanbul, in April, was able to gather together not only some government leaders who were parliamentarians in democracy, but the numbers of people that I described earlier, 1,500 delegates, 720 parliamentarians from 126 countries. And this Robin's suggestion that people voluntarily join the United Nations, knowing its limitations, like any small power, new country does whatever it can, of course, to survive in a very, very difficult world. But to suggest that that was with the expectation that they had power to challenge the misuse of the veto powers for self-interest and dominance and competition between the great powers. I don't believe that's so. I always think of, I remember because I've got a project in Myanmar, and I looked to see whether Myanmar had become a member of the United Nations, and it did. My recollection was sometime in the 70s when it became independent. But It look at I mean, that hopeless country in conflict, perpetrating genocide. No one can do anything about it. China is extracting minerals. Migrants are flowing out of the country into Thailand and into Bangladesh. I mean, so the reality is it is such a dysfunctional thing. And I do not think that we can take this in a gradualistic, step by step, bit by bit approach, because the risk of nuclear weapon abolition, climate change, extinction, a slower death, AI, unregulated, unethical, and all of the different complications that we have as a planet, and we don't have an effective means to deal with it through the United Nations, and now a disregard of the rule of law and a just world order by the United States of America and Russia. I mean, this is a desperate situation. We don't have time. We don't have time. There has to be a legitimate, credible, effective way to build a collective will to force governments to change and have the moral courage to do what is in the best interest of humanity and including their own citizens. And those best interests now, science can prove, of course, involve a reformed United Nations and rules that are going to be applicable to everybody. We got the living proof that the great powers are not validating the trust extended to them, the trust of having the responsibility of protecting the planet and preventing wars and building a culture of peace. They have just not done that. They're doing the direct opposite.
But David, why do you think a parliamentary assembly or other mechanism would change any of that? What would it change about either the behavior of powerful states or the structures? I'm not disagreeing with you that the UN has flaws. I'm saying it has flaws because that's the nature of our world community right now. I don't think our world community has flaws because the UN Charter is imperfect. I think that we have flaws because that's the nature of our nation states.
I think we have flaws because of the nature of the nation states that have the veto powers. I mean, it's just become patent that we can't entrust the survival and equal opportunity to flourish of humanity to 5 states in the world with a veto power. It simply can't be done. I mean, if that were the change, or you could, I mean, one of the suggestions by the coalition is, for example, that a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly could override a veto power. I mean, that would be a hugely significant amendment. But like you say, of course, they'll resist it, given their state of thinking. But when their people realize that this is risking their lives and health and the ability of future generations to even enjoy life on Earth, that's what needed. We need a mass movement, coalition of movements to bring about a set of rules that are generally acceptable and are based on generally accepted universal values.
Thank you, David. Rose.
Well, in the video that we were asked to watch beforehand, a point came up that one of the problems with the UN not functioning as well as it might is that we've had weak secretary generals, and perhaps this is not quite so, but it was implied that we haven't really had anybody strong enough to handle the different conflicts and competing visions and views that come up since Dag Hammarskjöld. And I just wondered what the rest of you thought that saw this video, and also Robin, I think I've heard you in the past say that you don't believe that we need a whole new global governance architecture, which there are various groups that are suggesting this. I'd be curious to know what you or anybody else thought of the Augusto Lopez Claris's approach to this. He spoke at the University of Toronto Faculty Club about a year ago with his proposal on all of this. And one of the things that was recommended in it was that is now missing because he did talk about it, the charter being hopelessly out of date, that we need a new Earth Systems Council, for example, to address specifically the looming dangers on the climate changes imposing and so on. And I just he has about 10 recommendations there. One missing, in my view, would be something that would address the aspect of our new digital age, that maybe we'd need a council on that as well. But anyway, I just yeah, throw out those thoughts.
I think the 2 points that Rose has brought up, the idea of the Secretary General being weak since Dag Hammarskjöld, it'd be interesting to reflect on that. But also the point brought up by David in terms of needing a mass movement of civil society groups. I think both those need a little further discussion. Does anyone have anything to add on either of those?
I would just add on the Secretary General. And right now, there's interviews taking place of multiple people that have well-known global moral courage to become the replacement after the retirement of our current Secretary General, and that will be in 2027. So the intent, for example, of the 109 coalition is that part of the whole plan is to have a new Secretary General who is going to be someone that is going to be a champion for that kind of rewriting and not destroying and not burning and replacing, but doing a substantial shift in the way the UN is currently structured and where the power is in the UN, and make it a more democratic, equitable representation for the people of the world. So this is ongoing right now, and it's very interesting. And if you go to the website of the coalition, you'll see that this process is underway, and they name all of the people, they give their bios and everything else. So these are the candidates that are being sought to be the future servant leaders of our organization.
Thank you, David. Any other comment on Secretary General or?
I have one thought, and that is, of course, one of the things that Winston Langley proposed was a change in the length of tenure of each Secretary General. He claims that Secretaries General look to getting their second term approved by getting the P5 all on board, and therefore they don't want to offend anybody by being tough. And what they need to do is replace the two-term rule with one of 7 years, one term of 7 years. It would be the length of time for any Secretary General, and that would strengthen them. That's an interesting notion. I don't think we have a lot of time to discuss it, but it would be nice to know whether people think that is an important argument, or if not, do you have any better ideas of how to strengthen the power of the Secretaries General to do tough things the way Hammarskjöld did?
Anyone want to respond? Yeah, Robin.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable proposal because there's the lame duck problem, right? That you get in national legislatures as well as you would at the UN. I like, in terms of UN reform, I like the proposals that were put forward by the late Joe Schwarzenberg. And he put out a book on this. There's a whole string of them. He was generally of the view that they need to be embraced by the public and pushed forward, and then gradually over a period of time implemented. So he wasn't arguing shut down the UN and start up a new one with the charter all nice and squeaky clean. He was an incrementalist. One of the proposals that he had, I mean, there are many things you can raise about the UN Charter, and as was raised, the goals of the initial 51 are not necessarily the goals of the current 196 or whatever it was, 198. Um, um, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, and one of his proposals was to recognize that not all states are the same size, believe it or not. Some populations are significantly larger than others, and yet China and India have the same voting capacity. Well, actually, one has a veto, but as a nation, as an island state in the Caribbean or the Pacific, um, ridiculous. I mean, you have to, if there's something that's undemocratic, that's it. So one of his proposals was to, rather than sort of make it one vote, one person, in which case you would see a very different result in terms of decisions. And some of them good, some of them probably horrible, but is that you'd have a weighted reordering so that states that contribute financially would get a certain number of vote strengths, let's say. So those who had large populations would get a certain amount. Those that participated in, I think he said in peacekeeping, for instance, to put forward enforcement capabilities and so on, would get a certain amount. And so you would reorder and rejudge, and it would inspire certain states to be more proactive, let's say, and participate greater. I mean, you can see all sorts of problems with this, let alone the fact that it wouldn't fly with all sorts of states that would see their power diminished because they don't have a billion population. They've got, 50,000 or whatever. But Joe Schwarzenberg had a whole slew of interesting.
Well, yeah, I think, and this is getting interesting just at the end. I'd like to pursue this. And in fact, I think we ought to come back to it another time. But clearly, there's an alternative. You just keep your General Assembly with states being the entities that vote, and you create a parliamentary assembly which is representative of the population of the world, so that citizens that votes are distributed according to citizenry, how many people live where. So without regard to where they live in states. And there are ways of doing that. I would love to have a conversation about what sortition would be like in a parliamentary assembly, because we could do that so easily now with Zoom. You can have a legislature that's run where people sit in their bathtubs and vote, around the world. They can have conferences the way we're doing now, committee meetings of this kind, only you have translation so you can understand each other. The options that are now available for running deliberative discussions is just amazing and wonderful, and potentially the recovery of democracy. And here we're 4 minutes over, and I am talking too much. So I want to turn it back to ask Jill to finish this off and remind us to come back next week.
So is there any absolutely urgent comments before we draw this to a close?
I just want to say very quickly to Rob, and I would be a little cautious about suggesting that financial contributions would enlarge the potential of influence or a vote at the UN. We've already got problems at national levels with corporate finance that. So I'm not sure that would be a good way to go. But anyway, the other suggestions sound good. That's all. Thanks.
Well, I have two quick ones. First to Rose, it might inspire those states who are supposed to be paying their dues to actually pay their dues,
Yeah, like the U.S.
like the U.S.
Yeah.
Meta, if you had the UN General Assembly and the existing structure, and then you had the Parliamentary Assembly, which one would have the final vote on whether you're going to send in troops to block the genocide in Rwanda?
What I would do, my personal thing would be, I would say any two houses of the UN, and I count the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Parliamentary Assembly, and the IJC. Any two of them could invoke, if they both agreed, sanctions and even military intervention. If both houses agreed, that would mean, it would be equal, the rights.
So no veto, no veto.
No veto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad we're ending on an exciting note, and we're going to all reconvene, I hope, next Wednesday and carry this forward. So many thanks, and have a good week. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.